So let's bring in Justine Greening and Tom Baldwin to get their analysis of what we've seen so far. Tom, what do you make of the Blackpool South by-election victory by Labour, first of all? They were expected to win, weren't they? But was it a was the scale of the win bigger than you expected?
Yeah, I was talking to people on the ground about it just a couple of days ago, and they weren't expecting one of these record swings. I think they've now got the third biggest swing in Labour Party history in a by-election. And so, at the moment, they're cock-a-hoop because they think this is the contest that matters. This is the parliamentary contest. This is the one when Rishi Sunak's government and his record is on the ballot paper, rather than all the local factors and personality factors you get in the local and mayoral contests. So they've done much better than they thought they would do in Blackpool.
And yet the Tories would say there are personality factors, the fact that the manner in which the Tory MP exited in a lobbying scandal, for example. Do you think they have a point, or should they be really worried about the scale of this swing?
I think whichever party you're in, the Blackpool result was way worse for the Conservatives than I think people had expected. And I think the problem is if the party has a strategy now of essentially trying to be reform light, even if you added both those parties' votes together in Blackpool, it's still nowhere near beating Labour. And so I think where the Conservatives are this morning, and there's a lot of results still to come in, is what is the plan? Because it's not going to be enough just to try and garner another 10% from the reform vote. What we've seen is that strategy over the last 2, 3, 4 years has simply taken the Conservative Party down a political cul-de-sac, and that's where it finds itself, I think, today.
So what would you recommend? I mean, you were in government. What should they do? They've tried tax cuts. That doesn't seem to have moved the dial. They can boast about inflation coming down to their target. They can say they've got the Rwanda bill through. It doesn't seem to be helping them so far. So what would you recommend that they do? That's
right, and that's because the party isn't setting out, under Rishi Sunak, a broad vision for Britain. People voted for a different kind of Britain after Brexit. They wanted a Britain that was levelled up, that had equality of opportunity. Rishi Sunak has essentially ditched that. And I think in doing so, you've seen the party go backwards in the polls. So that needs to become centre stage again. And I think for Rishi Sunak, you know, it's interesting listening to Richard Holden out on the airwaves today talking about the credit for 14 years of a Conservative government, for example, in education, an area that I was Secretary of State in. Yet the Conservative Party conference back in October last year, Rishi Sunak was setting aside 30 years of what he called a failed political consensus. I think the reality is that at the top of the party, there has not been a sense of how to proceed, both in terms of where the party wants to take Britain or how to build an electoral coalition of voters to support that.
Yeah, I mean, for most of my life, the Conservative Party has been this formidable election-winning machine, probably the best anywhere in Western democracies. And, I've been on the Labour side and I've seen, we've lost. It doesn't seem like they're the sensible party of government at the moment. I mean, Keir Starmer has this phrase about what he's done to the Labour Party. He's turned it inside out. He's turned it from a party that looks inwards to its activists to a party that looks outwards to the voting public. The Tory party seems to have done the opposite. They've gone from a party which actually felt like a sensible, grown-up party to one which listens only to quite marginal, extreme activists who've taken Rishi Sunak away from the centre ground, off into the Badlands. They elected Liz Truss. They gave us Boris Johnson. They wrecked Theresa May's government. She couldn't get a good Brexit deal. They forced David Cameron to have a referendum in Europe. Almost everything that sort of strange that's happened in British politics over the last 20 years has been down to this very small group of Tory party activists and the change of the Tory party.
Look, from the early results, it seems inescapable that the electoral coalition that Boris Johnson put together in 2019 has splintered. Whether it's Reform, whether it's Labour advancing, all of that is a problem. Labour are now in a good position. But Labour will be worried that they might lose that. I'm interested from both of you. What could change the current political situation? Labour's worried about black swan unexpected events. The Tories have the platform of government to do something. What do you both think could actually change the dial in British politics?
Well, Morgan McSweeney, who's director of Labour's campaign, likes to point out that back in 1997, last time Labour won a big majority from opposition, 70% of people always voted the same way. Now it's only 40%. The electorate is very volatile. And so Labour are definitely not taking anything for granted. They know that their big poll lead could evaporate quite fast. And I thought it was quite interesting today, Pat the Fadder on the radio, as I was coming in, was talking about, there is a problem with some Muslim voters, not most, but some. And that's kind of quite self-confident. You don't normally get politicians the day after elections admitting that they've got a problem. But I think they're looking at, where they need to improve, where they are absolutely focused on victory. And those comments from Pat McFadden, I thought, were interesting in their honesty, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to try and sort out every potential problem that comes their way.
I think that there's two areas, really. One is that over the coming months there's going to be a lot of digging into the Labour manifesto, and in particular in relation to public spend, and I think those are tough questions for both parties. But I think the other massive thing that could change, Sam, is, of course, reform and its candidates. And at the last election, a big part of Boris Johnson's landslide was the fact that Nigel Farage was forced to stand aside. Reform today are adamant that that won't happen. But they, in a sense, are that crucial added dimension in the forthcoming election that wasn't there in 2019, a fractured right-wing vote, which previously was united. But the point in between times is the pressure's coming from the fact that it hasn't delivered on the promise of levelling up for the British people, and that's why it's under pressure.
In a very quick word, is Rishi Sunak safe?
No, I don't think he is, and I think a lot of MPs will take the bank holiday weekend to consider what these results mean in their own communities and for them personally. So whether or not they say that in public, I think a lot of MPs will be thinking through that question in private.
There's some Labour people I know who'd be quite content, in a way, Ben Houchen and Andy Street, hang on, because people will see that as a sign that, these results weren't so quite as bad as people thought for the Tories after all. And if that means Rishi Sunak hangs on, they think that's not a bad thing either. They don't want to change the narrative. Anything that's uncertain, which might just change things around, a new Prime Minister who hasn't been exposed to sunlight yet, that could still change things. They want to keep things as they are, keep this narrative. They don't want any surprises.